All right, today's or this week's guest is the Minneapolis Star Tribune's Megan Ryan. She's covered Minnesota. Is this the second year? Third year?
Yep, this is my second season.
Second season. Have a history with her here in Dallas. She was one of the first interns I hired, and she's just an all-around great person, great journalist, and very excited to have Megan here to talk about the Michigan-Minnesota opener. So, Megan, welcome, and thank you for your time this week.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Scott. It's good to connect with old friends, so it's nice.
So what's the excitement like in Minnesota? I think everyone's kind of stir crazy and ready for how long this build-up's kind of been for the season. But what's kind of the mood there now that we're finally to the point where we're going to be playing some football?
Yeah, I think it's weird, right? This is just a weird season, weird situation. But I think like on again, off again, whatever the Big Ten was doing all summer long. People are excited. I mean, if you're a football fan, I think you want them to play. Obviously you want them to stay safe and all of that, but like it would have just been ideal if there would have been a way to play because everybody wants to see it. But I think the weird thing is just like number one from the fan perspective is even though like, oh yeah, we've got football to watch on Saturday, it's like College Gameday is coming here, but it's not going to be like last year when College Gameday was here because there's not going to be any crowds. There's not going to be any fans in the stands minus like I think a couple family members from the players. So like you're excited about it, but you got to like contain that excitement to your living room and your TV with maybe a couple of friends, but not a giant party. So, it's just like it's a weird thing because I think people are excited, but it's just like where do you place that? Because I don't have the tailgating or whatever I would have normally done or gone out to the College Gameday set like I usually would. And then I think from just the point of the team and media that cover it or whatnot, it's like it's been hard for us to judge what the team is doing and the excitement for them because the access, the availability, which I know is kind of like inside baseball, who cares? But like we haven't really talked to PJ Fluck or the players that often or regularly at all. And usually in a regular season, you've got training camp in August and there's set times and you talk to everyone and then once the season starts, you get set things, but it's like it's been so nebulous. So it's been really hard to kind of pinpoint like, well, how's this player doing? Or, what does the offensive coordinator think who just got hired in January and we've only talked to you like maybe 2 times? Like, we don't know. So a lot of it is just like, who knows? But I think once the season gets started, once they start playing, even though it's going to be a little bit different, I think people are just going to be excited, especially with how good the Gophers were last year and how good people are expecting them to be this year. So hopefully they can recapture that excitement, even if it's a little bit different.
I think that plight when it comes to access and availability and getting to see practice and stuff, I know that's shared from my friends in Ann Arbor who cover this program a little more traditionally and down here in Texas as well. So I don't think you're alone there. You kind of alluded to it at the end about just like the excitement being amplified because Minnesota's expected to have such a good team. It seems like most projections, Minnesota sexy pick to win along with Wisconsin and some of the more constant forces in the West. You feel like this is kind of a year where Minnesota could contend and be in the battle to get into the conference title game?
I mean, I think so. I think in my picks, I think I still put Wisconsin over them, but I do have Minnesota as number 2. Gophers fans aren't going to like that, but whatever. I think that if Rashod Bateman hadn't come back, I would have been a different story, and I'm not sure I would have quite believed in them. But I think the fact that he's back, Tanner Morgan is back, the returning starting quarterback of like quality is kind of rare in this league right now. So I think that that's going to be a real asset for them. Yeah, there's a lot of question marks on defense, a lot of guys that maybe haven't been starters before, but I think the good news is that defensive coordinator Joe Rossi was kind of big on rotations. And so almost every player got in games last year regularly, even if they weren't starting, from different packages or whatnot. And so if they're coming into a starting position this year, it's not like they never played before. It's like, they all had pretty regular playing time. So I feel pretty good about it. I think the great unknown is what this season is going to be like for everybody. Like, how are teams going to handle not playing in front of fans? How are you going to travel all of the new testing protocols? And if somebody should test positive, you got to sit out for 21 days. Like, how are you going to handle all those kind of hits to your depth at different points? Or just the fact that you could be preparing for a game and then it gets canceled. And like, what do you do? Like, there's a lot of those things. And I think those are extra challenges that nobody's really faced before. So in some ways, it, I think, maybe levels the playing field a bit. Because everybody's dealing with the same stuff, and maybe, if you take out the home field advantage aspect, it's like, okay, well, who really is the best team? So I think we'll see, because honestly, anything could happen this year, and I wouldn't be shocked, because this is such a weird year. So Rutgers could win, and I'd be like, that's fine.
Okay, it's gonna be weird, but let's not get into the apocalyptic stuff. So.
I don't know. This is the Schiano era, the round 2. So this could be it.
Well, I'll be rooting on the Scarlet Knights in their opener against Michigan State. That's for sure. So you mentioned Rashod Bateman coming back. Kind of a contrast here. Minnesota star receiver comes back after opting out. Michigan's Nico Collins opts out, and there was some talk about whether he'd come back or not, but he's not. I think you wrote a feature about Bateman, and he talked about how he dealt with COVID head on. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
What did he have to say, or what's kind of the backstory on that for Michigan fans that might not be as familiar with that?
Yeah. So Rashod, obviously, I mean, great receiver, really good receiver, and kind of regardless of what happened this year, we all knew he wasn't going to be back for his senior year. He was going to go to the NFL because he's like a first-round pick, possibly a top 10 pick. So, what happened is I think early August, it was right, maybe like a day or two. I think it was just a day before, if I remember correctly, that the Big Ten announced their revised football schedule for the first time before they canceled the season. Rashod opted out and said, coronavirus concerns or whatnot. And then he was opted out for about 6 weeks. And then obviously when the Big Ten decided to come back, he pretty quickly after that decision, re-enrolled in school, got back practicing with the team, and started the reinstatement process with the NCAA, because he had obviously signed with an agent and taken money for housing and transportation and training and all that stuff. So he had to go kind of through this process of how to get his eligibility back, which I think the NCAA kind of did a blanket, it's fine. Pay back what you took from the agent at some point in time, and like, you all can come back this year. So he got reinstated. But when I talked to him, when he finally came back, I was kind of just exploring his decision. And he was the one who kind of openly brought up, he's like, yeah, a lot of people don't know that I had COVID over the summer. And I was like, oh. And it was something, I think, that he influenced his decision maybe beyond what people thought about at the time. Like, maybe they just thought, oh, well, he just doesn't want to play, he just wants to go to the NFL, and, he doesn't care about coming back. But I think that when you go through that experience, and he has asthma too, so, I think he might have been a little extra worried. And even though he came out of his illness, fine. I mean, he had symptoms. He had like a bad flu, as I think what he described it as. And even though he recovered and is, hopefully, I think, fine, I think it scared him a little bit. And I think it happened fairly close to when he decided to opt out. So I think that kind of was enough to push him over the edge, especially with the Big Ten being kind of like nebulous about what are the safety protocols and what are we doing. But when they came back, and I think the daily testing, and he had kind of seen how, some other leagues have proceeded with playing and done okay, not great. SEC's not great, but they, doing okay. I think that maybe convinced him to come back, because he felt a little bit safer about doing it now. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey for Rashod. And I think I think another part of it was he maybe underestimated how lonely it would be to leave school and be living, in a condo in downtown Minneapolis alone, not on campus with all of his friends. he kind of missed that team aspect, and I think getting that, maybe he realized that college does not last forever, unfortunately. So if you can spend as much time there, you kind of want to, which I, as a 28-year-old person, can say.
Co-sign that. I feel like Andy Bernard at the Office finale, where he's like, when do you realize like the good times, or you're not living in the good times anymore, or I don't know, whatever. I miss college is what I'm trying to say. So Bateman's the go-to guy there. He was kind of the complement with Tyler Johnson the last few years. Obviously has the talent to be a go-to guy in his own, but between losing Johnson as sort of a sidekick or a complement or someone to take some attention away from him, and I know you mentioned you haven't really gotten to speak too much to him, but what's going to be different about Minnesota's offense this year, or what sort of unanswered questions are there?
Well, I think everything that we've heard from Sanford, which again hasn't been a ton, but I don't anticipate them changing the offensive scheme that dramatically, just because it worked so well last year. And besides Tyler Johnson and Rodney Smith, which was their top receiver and top running back, besides them graduating and moving on, everybody else is back. So there really is no need to do some giant overhaul of a system that was working pretty well last year. So I think maybe there will be new tweaks, and every offensive coordinator, like, maybe he's going to add a little flair of his. But I wouldn't expect any kind of wholesale change, at least in this first year. Maybe once everyone's graduated and he kind of can mold it to his image. But I think it's going to be fairly similar. And I think, what is going to be interesting is like the receivers. When initially, like this year, they were going to have Rashod as the number 1, Chris Ottman-Bell as the number 2, and then Demetrius Douglas as the number 3. And Chris Ottman-Bell had been the number 3 last year behind Johnson and Bateman, and obviously like didn't get a lot of limelight behind those two, but did really come in clutch. Like there were times when people wouldn't key on him, obviously, because they've got 2 other people to deal with, and he would get these pretty magnificent catches. And then Demetrius Douglas was kind of the first guy rotated in, and he was like the long 3rd down, 4th down man. Anytime there was like an improbable 3rd or 4th down, it was like, we're going to throw it to Meach. So Demetrius Douglas, though, actually ended up opting. I think he retired from football entirely just a couple weeks ago. So now they've kind of got this 3rd receiver slot open that could be filled by a true freshman. They've got Douglas Millian and Daniel Jackson, who are these 2 guys that they are excited about that are true freshmen. Could be a Seth Green guy, who's mostly their Wildcat quarterback, but he got a couple of snaps as a receiver last year. So maybe he comes in and does that 3rd place role. But I think what's good is, Chris Ottman-Bell, I think, has been really primed for a bigger role, because he was really good last year, but he just didn't have, a lot of the spotlight when it came to Tyler and Rashod. But he's going to have to take a lot of the spotlight this year, because if people are double playing Rashod all the time, like, he's the one who's getting the ball. So he's going to have to take some heat off of Rashod, and I think that's something he's kind of excited for, is what I get the impression about him. So that's going to be interesting. And then I think, running back, as far as filling in for Rodney Smith, the good news there is they've got Muhammad Ibrahim, who's going to be the number 1 again. And he was the number 1 2 years ago as a freshman, because Rodney Smith and Shannon Brooks both got hurt, and he kind of got thrust into the starting job, and he did pretty well. And last year he kind of took a step back, obviously, because Rodney and Shannon had returned from injury, and so he let them kind of take the lead again. But then now he's ready to kind of come back into number 1. And he was really good in the Outback Bowl, which I kind of like thought of his re-debut into 2020, like, I'm back. Bet you thought you saw the last of me. So I think he's going to be really good. So, and everyone else, like, they're all returning. I think Tanner's going to be good. He shocked us all last year, and I don't think he's going to take a big step back this year. So, yeah, I think the offense is going to be pretty similar to what it's been, and still very successful.
So where do you see the biggest question marks, or kind of the area of concern on this team? Imagining that's on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, definitely defense, just because there are so many people coming into starting roles for the first time. I think if I had to name a solid point of the defense, it would be the cornerbacks. I think your starters of Benjamin St. Juste and Coney Durr are two guys that, Coney Durr's been on the team for a really long time, but he had a bad knee injury and then wasn't quite the same. And then last year he looked pretty good. And then now I think it's like he's ready to go. And St. Juste was a late transfer last year from Michigan.
Michigan fans are quite familiar with him.
Yes. And so he was kind of this unknown dude. He's this like French Canadian guy, and we had, okay, he's coming in. But he really kind of came into his own throughout the season, and he's become a real leader on the team too, I believe. And so I think those two are going to be really strong, especially, with kind of NFL draft stock on the line. And the fact that the rest of the defense is pretty new, they're going to have to be pretty solid back there. So I'm excited to see what they do. I think one of the big question marks, but an exciting question mark, is the safety position, particularly who's going to fill in for Antoine Winfield Jr., NFL Rookie of the Year, essentially, this year. He was so solid back there and such a talented player and could just do so much from that position. Like sometimes he was, a true safety with pass coverage, and sometimes he was up by the line of scrimmage and like a linebacker. And he could really do it all. He had sacks, he had interceptions, he had everything. So that's a big key position. He got a lot of freedom to do what he wants because he could see the field so clearly. And so there's this guy, Tyler Newton, who was a 4-star recruit last season, and he was the only freshman that burned his red shirt, and he got time on special teams and a couple of defensive rotations. And so they tried really to work him in, kind of foreseeing that Winfield would not be long for this Gophers team. And so he's going to have to step up into that spot. And, I can't say that I remember him being stunning last year because, again, he was a freshman and obviously there's a lot of other people going around. But I'm really excited to see what he could do because I know the coaching staff is really high on him. So that's kind of a position that's a question mark because it was really important for the Gophers last year, but they could have, another really good player there. We just kind of don't know yet. So that's kind of one of the most exciting question parts on defense, but there's a lot. It's kind of an interesting side of the ball.
And we actually get to watch football soon to see some of these answers. I feel like the last, I was going to say 3 months, really the last 6 months have been just talking and talking and talking. So it's exciting to get to the point where we actually get to watch football. As for the game itself, you have a prediction, thoughts going into Saturday? I don't know if you publish yours and you have to embargo that or anything, but what's kind of your thoughts heading into Saturday's game?
No, I did make a prediction, and I'm trying to remember what it was because I feel like I write these things down and then I immediately just forget about it. My big thing with predictions is it's just my blanket preface for anybody who wants to keep tally and then wag their finger at me later when I'm wrong. Is it's all a shout into the void. It's a fruitless endeavor to predict the future, especially in 2020 when all of this is just a big chaotic mess. So, but I will make a prediction. So I think I
sorry, I was just going to say,
winning.
You have the Gophers winning. Okay. No, go ahead. It's all good.
Sorry. My big stance on my existential thing about score predictions. It was kind of dramatic. So I think I said I have the Gophers winning. Part of that is because I know Michigan has got a couple of question marks on that offense, and that's a place that the Gophers are really solid and have a lot of things figured out. And I've seen that offense really take over the last couple of last season, and they definitely could just take over games and just rack up a lot of points. So I gave the Gophers the edge in that. And I think I had the score at 35-17, which I know is pretty dramatic, but I was just kind of thinking back to last year, and there was a lot of times when I undersold the Gophers offense. So I didn't undersell them this time. And that might come back to haunt me because last year they were really not good in their first couple of games, which were non-conference games, and they managed to eke out wins. And they obviously don't have those this year, and they're playing Michigan. So I could be very wrong, but that's what I'm saying. So everybody mark your little notebooks and come at me on Twitter.
Well, if you're talking wrong predictions, you're talking to the right person. I think before the Michigan Wisconsin game last year, I did a table, a position by position who's got the edge or whatever. And I was just like, I don't know why people are so worried about this Wisconsin game. Michigan's got the edge in pretty much all these categories, and Wisconsin just completely wiped the floor with Michigan. And it was like one of 3 like truly non-competitive games of the Harbaugh era. So if you end up being wrong, we can come up with some sort of support group or something. But I have certainly been in that boat before. Last kind of question.
Well, to be fair, I picked last year. I picked Nebraska to win the West and Michigan to win the East, and that Michigan was going to win the Big Ten championship. So I've been burned before by Jim Harbaugh.
That's your fault. Although last year Michigan was a sexy pick just because Ryan Day was just coming in and there was some uncertainty. But I think once Ohio State played 2 or 3 games, everyone was like, oh yeah, okay, it's just gonna be the same. Never mind. status quo. So last question before I let you go. It's always interesting to me because I know Michigan's got a lot of rivalries, and where Minnesota stands on that is interesting because you have the brown jug in that rivalry game, but there's also other things, and I know Minnesota has their thing with Wisconsin and other things like that. So what's sort of jug week like in Minneapolis, and where does Michigan sort of fall on the spectrum of who Minnesota students and fans hate the most, and just how big is opening with a rivalry game like this?
Well, one thing to know about Minnesota, and particularly Gophers football, is they love a trophy. Anytime there's a trophy involved, you could be playing just anyone. And it could be somebody that you meet every once in 100 years, but if there's a trophy at stake, Gophers are excited, and they want that trophy. They have a little display case in their football facility, and they have like the axe, and they did have the axe, not anymore, and they have the Governor's Liberty Bell from Penn State. So it's a place they like to display those things, and that means a lot to them. So there is excitement about it just because there's a trophy. But I will say it's the heated rivals of the Gophers are 100% Wisconsin and Iowa. Those are the trophy games and the border rivalry games that are deeply impactful to the team from a standings position and to the fans from an emotional position, because those are the teams that they play every year. And, Michigan obviously is a really good team. And if they were to play Ohio State, that would be an exciting game too, because it's just like you're playing the best. But the fact of the matter is they don't see those teams every year like they do for Iowa and Wisconsin. And the proximity is so close. And I think the other thing about those two programs is they've done something the Gophers haven't been able to do, which is to establish consistency. Maybe not for the best, because I know Kirk Ferentz is kind of under fire right now, but Kirk Ferentz, Barry Alvarez, they've established these programs over the long term and had basically long-term success. Not that they've won the Big Ten championship every year, but they've been in the conversation every year. Gophers haven't had that. They've had a ton of coaches in the past, in the time that Barry Alvarez and Kirk Ferentz have been with those programs. There's been a ton of different head coaches and a ton of different athletic directors. And that's been hard for the Gophers to find success because of that, because they're always starting over every 3-4 years or however long it is. So those are the games that they want to win. And I think particularly this year, it's taken on even more fervor because those are the 2 games they lost last year. And those are the 2 games that kept them from the Big Ten championship. They had it all in their hands. They were 2 games ahead, I think, at one point in time. And then they lost to Iowa and they lost to Wisconsin, and that was it. And yeah, they still got to go to the Outback Bowl and play Auburn, and it was fun. But they had the Rose Bowl in their reach, and they missed it because they lost to those 2 guys. So I think that those are still kind of the heated ones that really matter. But, Michigan's one of the perennial, contenders in the East. They're always in the conversation about that. And the Gophers can't always say that about themselves. So I think there is some excitement there about starting off with a bang against this big East Division team with a trophy on the line. They're going to want to win that and, prove that last year wasn't a fluke. So I do think that there's a lot of motivation there for that as well.
Cool. Well, like I said, we're all excited to see football games this weekend. Trophies or not, but it's an added bonus that there are trophies. So everyone, Megan Ryan from the Minneapolis Star Tribune, follow her coverage. That's the Minneapolis Star Tribune. She has one of the greatest Twitter handles of all time, at the other Meg Ryan. She also has an Instagram cooking account. You want to plug that? What's your app
Well,
for that?
it's just my basic account, which is at the other my grind. It's my brand. Any social
Okay,
media, that's
there it
probably
is.
where I am. But yeah, I like to cook. Has nothing to do with football, but if you guys like food and like to see people cook food, come on over to Instagram. It's a
Well,
good
there
distraction from 2020 and this horrible year.
indeed. Well, the year is about to get a lot less horrible because we're going to have college football unless the pandemic, unless there's another big outbreak in the
We'll
next
have
four or
it for
five
a
days.
little bit at least.
Yeah.
Just a brief
But
moment, if nothing else.
But yeah, thank you so much for your time. And everyone, shoot her a follow and follow her coverage. She's one of the good ones doing this. So thanks again for your time, and we will talk to you later.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott.
All right, thank you.